Hi. In section 29 of Counsels and Maxims, Schopenhauer does a couple of things. He tells us why men of noble character tend to be less practically wise than people of low character. He discusses how nature will conceal people's true character from us and how we have to make a significant effort to uncover that character, and how one of the most important ways we can discover somebody's true character is by observing how he behaves in trivial matters, in unguarded moments. He also insists that character is the only sure guide for predicting somebody's behavior in the future. We should not prefer any other method of prediction to knowing somebody's character. And he discusses the ways in which literature can be a good guide for instructing us on the types of behavior and the types of character we should expect from our fellow man. Here's what he writes. It is often the case that people of noble character and great mental gifts betray a strange lack of worldly wisdom and a deficiency in the knowledge of men, more especially when they are young, with the result that it is easy to deceive or mislead them. And that, on the other hand, natures of the commoner sort are more ready and successful in making their way in the world. The reason for this is that when a man has little or no experience, he must judge by his own antecedent notions. And in matters demanding judgment, an antecedent notion is never on the same level as experience. For with the commoner sort of people, an antecedent notion means just their own selfish point of view. This is not the case with those whose mind and character are above the ordinary, for it is precisely in this respect, their unselfishness, that they differ from the rest of mankind. And as they judge other people's thoughts and actions by their own high standard, the result does not always tally with their calculation. I think part of what Schopenhauer is saying here is that the exceptional person, having only his own self to judge by, judges other people and calculates his expectations for other people according to what he would expect himself to do in those circumstances. And precisely because he's out of the ordinary, he makes wrong judgment calls. This is especially the case when he's young and does not yet have enough experience of the way in which the rest of the world differs from him. Schopenhauer continues. But if, in the end, a man of noble character comes to see, as the effect of his own experience, or by the lessons he learns from others, what it is that may be expected of men in general, namely that 5/6 of them are morally and intellectually so constituted that if circumstances do not place you in relation with them, you had better get out of their way and keep as far as possible from having anything to do with them. Still, he will scarcely ever attain an adequate notion of their wretchedly mean and shabby nature. All his life long he will have to be extending and adding to the inferior estimate he forms of them, and in the meantime he will commit a great many mistakes and do himself harm. Bit of humor here. It seems that in the process of going from being a young exceptional person to an old exceptional person, you will inevitably be, bit by bit, lowering your estimation of what you can expect from your fellow human beings. So this sounds like Schopenhauer reporting his own experience. We go on. Then again, after he has really taken to heart the lessons that have been taught him, it will occasionally happen that when he is in the society of people whom he does not know, he will be surprised to find how thoroughly reasonable they all appear to be, both in their conversation and in their demeanor. In fact, quite honest, sincere, virtuous, and trustworthy people, and at the same time shrewd and clever. But that ought not to perplex him. Nature is not like those bad poets who, in setting a fool or a knave before us, do their work so clumsily and with such evident design that you might almost fancy you saw the poet standing behind each of his characters and continually disavowing their sentiments and telling you in a tone of warning, "This is a knave, that is a fool, do not mind what he says." But nature goes to work like Shakespeare or Goethe, poets who make every one of their characters, even if it is the devil himself, appear to be quite in the right for the moment that they come before us in their several parts. The characters are described so objectively that they excite our interest and compel us to sympathize with their point of view. For, like the works of nature, every one of these characters is evolved as a result of some hidden law or principle, which makes all they say and do appear natural and therefore necessary. And you will always be the prey or the plaything of the devils and fools in this world if you expect to see them going about with horns or jangling their bells. Interesting. Here, of course, Schopenhauer says the nature of things is such that nature conceals the true character of knaves from us. We should not get used to the kind of how shall I put it? Obvious cliches, right? The devil character with devil horns, the bad guy who is obviously malevolent and a bad guy. Nature is like Shakespeare. Nature conceals, or I should say, Shakespeare is like nature. It conceals from us the true character of people. Don't expect your devils to wear horns, we might say. Schopenhauer continues, and it should be borne in mind that in their intercourse with others, people are like the moon, or like hunchbacks. They show you only one of their sides. Every man has an innate talent for mimicry, for making a mask out of his physiognomy, so that he can always look as if he really were what he pretends to be. And since he makes his calculations always within the lines of his individual nature, the appearance he puts on suits him to a nicety, and its effect is extremely deceptive. He dons his mask whenever his object is to flatter himself into someone's good opinion, and you may pay just as much attention to it as if it were made of wax or cardboard. Never forgetting that excellent Italian proverb, non è si tristo cane che non meni la coda. There is no dog so bad but that he will wag his tail. In any case, it is well to take care not to form a highly favorable opinion of a person whose acquaintance you have only recently made, for otherwise you are very likely to be disappointed, and then you will be ashamed of yourself and perhaps even suffer some injury. So, observation here that human beings by their nature, every one of them, excellent at mimicry and flattery, you would be foolish to take them at face value. So, some discernment is in the order of the day. Schopenhauer goes on. And while I am on this subject, there is another fact that deserves mention. It is this: a man shows his character just in the way in which he deals with trifles, for then he is off his guard. This will often afford a good opportunity of observing the boundless egoism of a man's nature and his total lack of consideration for others. And if these defects show themselves in small things, or merely in his general demeanor, you will find that they also underlie his action in matters of importance, although he may disguise the fact. This is an opportunity which should not be missed. If, in the little affairs of every day, the trifles of life, those matters to which the rule de minimis non applies, a man is inconsiderate and seeks only what is advantageous or convenient to himself, to the prejudice of others' rights, if he appropriates to himself that which belongs to all alike, you may be sure there is no justice in his heart, and that he would be a scoundrel on a wholesale scale, only that law and compulsion bind his hands. Do not trust him beyond your door. He who is not afraid to break the laws of his own private circle will break those of the state when he can do so with impunity. This reminds me of a common saying that you judge a man's character not by how he treats the interviewer, but by how he treats the secretary, by how he treats the help, people whom he thinks can have no possible benefit to him. It's in dealing with just those sorts of things. We might say if somebody snaps at people in a casual setting where there's nothing at stake, that's showing you kind of what he truly is inside. And as Schopenhauer is going to say, this governs people's behavior absolutely. We go on. If the average man were so constituted that the good in him outweighed the bad, it would be more advisable to rely upon his sense of justice, fairness, gratitude, fidelity, love, or compassion, than to work upon his fears. But as the contrary is the case, it is the bad that outweighs the good, the opposite course is the more prudent one. And simply to map that out, to play upon people's fears then is better and more advisable than to rely upon their sense of justice, fairness, gratitude. Why? Because the average man is more bad than good. Continuing. If any person with whom we are associated or have to do exhibits unpleasantness or annoying qualities, we have only to ask ourselves whether or not this person is of so much value to us that we can put up with frequent and repeated exhibitions of the same qualities in a somewhat aggravated form. Schopenhauer's footnote. To forgive and forget means to throw away dearly bought experience. Back to the main text. In case of an affirmative answer to this question, there will not be much to be said, because talking is very little use. We must let the matter pass, with or without some notice, but we should nevertheless remember that we are thereby exposing ourselves to a repetition of the offense. In other words, if the person is more valuable to us than so valuable to us that we would have to put up with this repetition of their annoying behavior, we should expect that they will continue to annoy us and with greater and greater frequency. If the answer is in the negative, we must break with our worthy friend at once and forever. Or, in the case of a servant, dismiss him. For he will inevitably repeat the offense, even though for the moment he is deep and sincere in his assurances of the contrary. There is nothing, absolutely nothing that a man cannot forget, but not himself, his own character. For character is incorrigible, because all a man's actions emanate from an inward principle, in virtue of which he must always do the same thing under like circumstances, and he cannot do otherwise. Let me refer to my prize essay on the so-called freedom of the will, the perusal of which will dissipate any delusions the reader may have on this subject. To become reconciled to a friend with whom you have broken is a form of weakness, and you pay the penalty of it when he takes the first opportunity of doing precisely the very thing which brought about the breach. Nay, he does it the more boldly because he is secretly conscious that you cannot get on without him. This is also applicable to servants whom you have dismissed and then taken into your service again. It seems to me this may also be applicable to romantic partners whom you've dismissed, discarded, and then taken back. Okay? If the lesson is not impressed upon them the first time, Schopenhauer seems to be saying all of the contrition in the world, all of the resolution to reform is not going to be effective if this is really a question of character, of who somebody is deep down. Schopenhauer continues. For the same reason, you should just as little expect people to continue to act in a similar way under altered circumstances. The truth is that men alter their demeanor and sentiments just as fast as their interest changes. And their design in this respect is a bill drawn for such short payment that the man must be still more short-sighted who accepts that bill without protesting it. Accordingly, suppose you want to know how a man will behave in an office into which you think of putting him. You should not build upon expectations, on his promises or assurances, for even allowing that he is quite sincere, he is speaking about a matter of which he has no knowledge. The only way to calculate how he will behave is to consider the circumstances in which he will be placed and the extent to which they will conflict with his character. Schopenhauer's point here, I think, being that if you're thinking of elevating somebody to an office of trust, don't listen to his promises, to his vows of fidelity, or his expectations, because honestly, he's speaking about what he knows not. He's casting a prediction just as much as you would be. The thing to do is to consider the circumstances, consider his character, and say, can a man of this character function well under these changed circumstances? Everything else is just window dressing. Going back to Schopenhauer now. If you wish to get a clear and profound insight, and it is very needful, into the true but melancholy elements of which most men are made, you will find it a very instructive thing to take the way they behave in the pages of literature as a commentary to their doings in practical life, and vice versa. The experience thus gained will be very useful in avoiding wrong ideas, whether about yourself or about others. But if you come across any special trait of meanness or stupidity, in life or in literature, you must be careful not to let it annoy or distress you, but to look upon it merely as an addition to your knowledge, a new fact to be considered in studying the character of humanity. Your attitude towards it will be that of the mineralogist who stumbles upon a very characteristic specimen of a mineral. There's kind of a stoic point here about not letting your equanimity and peace of mind be disturbed by the wickedness and laziness and vice that you observe in men. You simply add it to your collection. Say, another example of human beings being rather terrible. Okay? Don't let yourself, either in life or in literature, let the observations that you make ruin you or throw you into a tailspin. Of course, there are some facts which are very exceptional, and it is difficult to understand how they arise, and how it is that there come to be such enormous differences between man and man. But in general, what was said long ago is quite true, and the world is in a very bad way. In savage countries, they eat one another. In civilized countries, they deceive one another. And that is what people call the way of the world. What are states and all the elaborate systems of political machinery, and the rule of force, whether in home or in foreign affairs, what are they but barriers against the boundless iniquity of mankind? But does not all history show that whenever a king is firmly planted on the throne and his people reach some degree of prosperity, he uses it to lead his army like a band of robbers against adjoining countries? Are not almost all wars ultimately undertaken for purposes of plunder? In the most remote antiquity, and to some extent also in the Middle Ages, the conquered became slaves. In other words, they had to work for those who conquered them. And where is the difference between that and paying war taxes, which represent the product of previous work? All war, says Voltaire, is a matter of robbery, and the Germans should take that as a warning. That's the end of section 29 of Schopenhauer's Counsels and Maxims, reflection upon the nature of politics. Typically Schopenhauerian. The man seems to have a great deal of his outlook to share with us. I thought there were some very interesting observations in there about the nature of character and how to spot somebody's character, especially in their unguarded moments, dealing with trifles. I hope you found this interesting. We'll take a look at section 30 in the next video. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.